still as good as ever. But about 6 months ago, I bought a brand new bike. Follow me and I'll show you. And here it is, the Pivot Trail 429. Now, I've had this bike for about 6 months. I've put about 600 miles or so on it so far. And this is the fourth part of the series where we've taken a look at how I've spec'd out the build for this particular bike and tried to answer the question, after having ridden this for 6 months, 600 miles, would I make those same choices again? You know, we've looked at the brakes, we've looked at the shifters, we've looked at the wheels that I put on, and I'll put a link to all of those below. But today, in the fourth part of the series, I thought it would be fun to take a look at the bike as a whole and see, and basically ask that same question. After having lived with this thing for the last 6 months, 600 miles, would I pick it again today? And are there any other shortcomings that I've left off? For example, I upgraded the fork. We haven't talked about that yet. Haven't talked about the seat post dropper yet. Haven't talked about quite a few things yet that I thought would be important, especially now. You know, if you're looking at a new bike, there are so many different options out there. Where do you even begin? Like, holy crap, there's just so many options. So, all right, enough wasting time. Let's get into it. Oh, sometimes the simplest things are so hard. My name is Grant, Elru Bike. If you can't tell, I'm excited. We're talking about my new bike, the Pivot Trail 429, and I'm just going to give it away right now. I love this bike so much. You could probably stop there, but don't do it. In fact, subscribe, leave a comment below, all that good stuff. All right, so I thought we would start with taking a quick overlook of the total build of the bike, just to kind of orient ourselves a little bit here. So, starting from the ground up, tires. I've got the Maxxis Dissectors. Next, we've got the wheels. I chose the Reynolds Black Label Carbon with the Industry 9 hubs. For the fork, I actually upgraded that, haven't talked about that so far, to the Fox 140 Grip 2. From there, I've got the Fox Transfer Seat Dropper. Oops, I gave that away. From there, we've got the brakes. SRAM G2 Ultimate Black with rainbow hardware. And last but not least, we've got the SRAM X01 Axis Electronic Shifter Group Set. Alright, so we've got the build out of the way. Now maybe I thought it would be useful to set some more context and kind of show some of the terrain that I frequently ride this bike over to kind of help set the stage for where I'm coming from as far as when I'm identifying strengths and weaknesses and that sort of a thing. So, quick stage set here. I live in northern Utah, just a few minutes outside of Park City. So, a lot of those trails look like there's a whole lot of climbing. Anywhere, a short ride could be 1,000 vertical feet. Well, a short ride could be less, but typically anywhere from 1,000 up to 4,000 or plus, you know, vertical feet of vertical climbing. In a ride, you climb a whole bunch and you descend a whole bunch. Not always the case, but that's usually how I ride up here. From here, we've got two different areas south of me. You've got Moab, super famous. Everybody knows Moab. Haven't had the chance to ride this bike there yet. The other one is southern Utah called St. George and the Hurricane area. It's desert. It's beautiful, it's awesome. I've ridden this bike there a whole bunch this year. So between the mountains and the desert, that's primarily where this bike has spent most of its time. Okay, so I think we've kind of set the stage a bit there. Let me rewind just a little bit. Previous bike, it was a Pivot Mach 6, 155 mil of rear travel. Had that bike for almost 9 years. Part of what made me want to upgrade was a lot of the time when I was riding that bike, again, the trails I'm riding, I have to do a whole lot of climbing for the most part, and as much fun as that bike was on the way down, for me, the climbing was always a bit arduous. I had to work so darn hard, I would be exhausted at the end of a ride, and towards the end of that 9 years, I actually kind of got bored of riding it. And, you know, whether it was riding the same stuff, whether it was riding the same bike, whatever the case was, I had fallen out of love with what I thought was mountain biking But what it turned out was I had fallen out of love with that Pivot Mach 6. I just had it for too long, right? So part of the thought with wanting to get a new bike was trying to capture that efficiency, that hooked up feeling, that just pedal to the metal that seemed to always be missing in that Mach 6. So I started looking at some of these newer, shorter travel bikes, and through the urging of some of my friends saying, hey, it's cool, you actually can ride a 120 bike and it'll totally be fine. Well, a few test rides definitely prove that to be the case. So that's actually the first point I want to get into here. 160, 150, 140, 130, there's so many choices out there, right? I guess the question is 120 mil enough for a rear travel, you know, for the rear travel of your bike? And I can say, for the riding I do, and I'll cut to a few clips while I'm talking here about this, 120 mil of rear travel for me, except for one occasion, has been totally enough. At that one occasion where it wasn't enough, I was going down a really steep, rocky section, and I was, you know, going over 20 miles an hour, just as fast as I could hit this thing. And I had felt at that point that I literally could not go any, that I should not go any faster, that I had reached the limits of that suspension. Come to find out, I think I accidentally locked out the suspension instead of opened it up. I think I just wasn't familiar with which way did what, and I had accidentally locked it out instead of opened it up. And no wonder why it felt like that, which just even more goes to tell you that for me, the 120 is fine. Even locked out, it still survived. I still rode that thing, I still hauled butt down that thing basically, and I didn't die. So, long story short, for me and the terrain I ride, 120 is perfectly fine. All right, next, let me talk about the state of the bike. How has it aged, basically, over these 6 months? Now, again, I don't baby my stuff. I love to ride. I ride hard, and so far, so good. There have been a couple of things, like some chips in the paint, which, to be honest, are annoying. And one of them, in fact, happened before I was able to get the frame wrapped because I was too impatient to wait. But what do you do? That kind of stuff happens, and hopefully it's just cosmetic and it didn't go too far down. You know, I'm not really super worried about it damaging it. I had my previous bike for almost 9 years and beat the heck out of it, and the thing still looks brand new, basically. There are a couple of annoying things about it. For example, the cables in the front. I changed out the stem and it either shortened it or changed the angle of how they were going through the frame. They tend to rattle and buzz a little bit depending on, you know, what the situation is. I've tried to remedy that by putting some tape on it, changing the position of the little lock things, but you know, that's not really a wear item, it's just an annoying item. So aside from that, so far, so good. All right, next let's move into the areas that I feel are the strengths for this particular bike. And like I said, I was not only climbing efficiency, but I was after all-around efficiency. You know, I really wanted to feel hooked up, pedal to the metal, whether it was on the way up, whether it was on the way down. I just really enjoy that feeling of connectedness and just efficiency. And to be honest, this bike delivers that in spades. So much so that, oh, I don't know, a month or so into owning this bike, I switched from riding flat pedals, which I've ridden for the last 10 plus years, not only on my previous bike, but the bike before that. I switched to clipless pedals, and it was terrifying. What in the hell was I thinking? Well, I just knew, and I had a hunch that that is what the nature of this bike needed. It performed okay with the flats, and in fact I bought a brand new set of those Stamp 7 by Crank Brothers. It never quite felt like it was the right combination together. And obviously I'm still kind of learning and gaining back that comfort that I previously had, but it totally suits the bike. This bike hooks up, it goes like crazy uphill, it goes like crazy downhill, and it's amazing. I can ride multiple days in a row now, never been able to do that before. In fact, earlier this year, I had issued a challenge to some of my riding partners. Hey, let's see if we can ride 9,000 vertical feet of climbing in a week, according to Strava. Let's set ourselves up a little challenge to see if we can all make that. And myself and another one of my riding partners, we did actually make that 9,000 feet of vertical climbing in a week. And man, oh man, I had no idea how many miles and how much saddle time and how many day after days it actually takes to accomplish that 9,000 vertical feet of climbing in a week. So areas of strength, summarize. The thing is a rocket, both uphill, downhill. It's so fast and it's so fun and it feels so good. Next. Okay. Not everything's perfect. You know, when you're looking at a bike, it's really just kind of that sum total of all of the different components that you picked when you built it and how those work together and how they either contribute to your enjoyment or they take away from your enjoyment. Well, you never have all of the answers, and especially when you're trying new things like I was on the build of this bike, not all of them are winners. For example, I really dislike the brakes that I chose. The SRAM G2 Ultimates have been a complete disappointment to me and what I prefer in a set of brakes. I also have struggled a bit with the fork that I ended up upgrading to. I am not the most mechanical as far as bikes go, so the G2 offers a tremendous amount of adjustability, which is great if you're into that. If you're into adjusting the high and low compression, the high and low rebound, and that sort of a thing. To be honest, I am not. I am a set it and forget it sort of a person. Now, when this bike was set up by the guy that built it for me, he did an amazing job and it just absolutely worked. But then all of a sudden, I either bumped it, someone bumped it, the fork stopped working. Like all of a sudden, it just performed terribly. It felt like I was ricocheting over rocks when I was going uphill or downhill. It felt wooden. It just was terrible. I had no idea how to fix it. I tried adjusting every which way. I watched countless videos. I just couldn't figure it out. But luckily, I ran into someone that was able to point me into some local experts here, and they were able to get me dialed in. I'll put on the screen what ended up being my settings here. If you're having any issues, I'll even put the number down in the notes for this shop, and if you're local to Salt Lake City, they might be able to help you too. But at any rate, the fork was a bit of a challenge. Now that it's working again, it's dynamo. But that's probably something I wouldn't choose again in the future. The other thing, the seat dropper. Oh my gosh, that thing, I don't like it for a couple of reasons. One, within less than a month of having it, it completely failed and I had to warranty it.
That's about as good as it gets.
And luckily, the bike shop was really super helpful to get that taken care of. I also bought one. I didn't buy it, in fact. It just kind of came with it. It has way too much travel. Now, I'm not the tallest person in the world, so the amount of, you know, whatever that is that sticks out of the seat tube isn't enough for how far it goes down. And when I'm really rallying this bike downhill, the rear travel of that tire moves up enough that it slams into the seat occasionally, and it has torn up the underside of my seat pretty good. And to be honest, it's just like an abrasive boom, it's sort of a thing. Not a good thing. Not the seat dropper's fault on that one. I just didn't know any better when I picked it. So, all right. So some of the areas that I've really enjoyed riding this bike. Obviously, it's so quick and easy for me to just pop up to Park City that's kind of my go-to. But even more so than just my regular trails is when I get the opportunity to ride this bike out in the desert. Whether it's kind of more technical rock climbing stuff, up or downhill, whether it's just fast, racy stuff in the desert. Pivot's home base is Phoenix, Arizona, and you've got the amazing South Mountain and all of its technical stuff there. And you've also got that wide open kind of desert classic loop right at the base on the other side of the mountain of it. And it feels like whoever was building this bike totally had these two areas in mind, because the desert is just where this bike completely stands out and shines. And in fact, when I was demoing this bike, I was riding it in the desert and I fell in love with it down there. And to this day, it is absolutely my favorite place to take this bike. I wanted to make this quick. You know, if you want to check out some of the more in-depth views, again, we've got a full brake review that we did. We've got a full rim review, wheel set review that I did. And the shifters, also full review of those. I'll link them in the description or up in the corner. And to summarize, would I buy this bike again? Absolutely. I have loved this bike. It has re-sparked my absolute love and enjoyment for mountain biking. You know, maybe I had just gotten bored of my old one because I had it for too long. Or maybe now whatever the case is, I just enjoy the crap out of it. I'm seeing my times almost as fast, or, you know, meeting as fast as the fast I've ever ridden before. And this was many years ago when I was younger and in good shape and all of that nonsense and had tons of free time to ride as much as I wanted to. So all of the efficiencies and that hooked up feeling that I was after, I totally got it. This bike is a rocket, a complete rocket, uphill, downhill. It's so fast, so enjoyable. I love it. Can't recommend it enough. I hope that helps. If you have questions, leave them below. If I left something out, leave it below. I love to read your guys' comments. And if I haven't said so already, please subscribe. It helps me out so much. I love it. Thank you very much. Grant, Elrobike. Until next time, see you later. Bye.